Ata Marie, and welcome to this panel called Packing a Punch in Small Spaces, Nuance and Humour. My name is Tina Shaw. I'm a writer based in Aotearoa, New Zealand, and it's my privilege to introduce a range of really amazing writers from Aotearoa and around the world. I'll just have a couple of words, and then I'll go through and introduce each writer individually, and they will read. I was just thinking about humour in writing, and it's possibly one of the hardest things you could do as a writer. How to translate the real-time playfulness of humour to on paper or on computer humour. Humour is very subjective, and everyone has a different take on what humour is actually like. But writing humour can enhance any story, and it's wonderful for the reader. I found a nice meme. It said, you're a writer when you're always thinking of ways to make things worse for your protagonist. And, I think there's actually a lot of humour in that idea. So first of all, I'd like to introduce Diane Brown. Diane's a novelist, a memoirist, and poet who runs Creative Writing Dunedin. Her many and various publications include poetry collections, a verse novel, a travel memoir, and a poetic family memoir. Over to you, Diane. Oh, turn your mute. You've got your mute on.
Okay. I'm reading from Breach of All Size, and this is as a response to being commissioned by Michelle and Marcono Segozi, and it was supposed to include details about Venice with some reference to Ulysses, because each short story, as other people will be reading as well, starts with the beginning of a chapter from Ulysses. So I thought about it, it's sort of, I never tried to be humorous, it's just loosely based on a trip I did with my husband from Padua to Venice one day. But the husband is not necessarily my husband. Stately plump. Stately plump, her husband said. They were on the train from Padua to Venice. Padua was cheaper to stay in. There were fewer tourists, though still a queue to see Giotto's frescoes. Most of the women in the frescoes were plump, she had noted, and this was before pizza and pasta. She'd decided to avoid hell if she could, story-friendly, but terrifying and far too hot. She was sweating just thinking about it. A man facing her across the aisle was staring at her. About her age, he was dishevelled with messy grey hair and a wrinkled shirt. Did she remind him of his dead mother, sister, wife? She felt exposed, checked her red dress to see if she had spilt something. She fingered her glass heart pendant. Max always suggested necklaces, probably to be diverted from the large expanse of her chest. You never look at me anymore, she'd said, wondering if he ever had, even if he wasn't the ogling type. When she told her friend Alice about the molestations she'd experienced in Italy 40 years ago, Alice said it had never happened to her. She'd been there with her husband. Well, I doubt it will happen to me this time, husband or not, she'd said to Alice. She turned her attention to Max, his face obscured behind a London review of books.
When are they coming?
Oops. What the hell, she'd said, flapping the paper down. I'll grant you plump, but stately? I'm too short for stately, Max. Max laughed. Sorry, he said. I'm reading about James Joyce visiting Venice. He lived in Trieste for years. Stately plump, of course, are the first words of Ulysses. She sighed. I'll read it when we get back, she said. That's what you always say, he said. I've read the beginning and the end to get the flavour, but there's always something else demanding my attention, she said. We're here, Max said. A gondola? She asked. Maybe, he said. Depends. It always depended. She joined the crowd at the door, felt a firm hand cup her buttock. She couldn't bring herself to turn around and swear at the stranger. And in truth, it felt thrilling for a moment. A man grabbed my bum, she said on the platform. Max laughed. That was me, he said. I saw him looking at you. He fingered her necklace. She would tell Alice a man had felt her up. Intent was all, but damned if I was going to let him. You're my stately plump. She smiled, took his hand. Yes.
Thanks, Diane. That's wonderful. And Trish Gribbon's books have been published by the Waitakere Contemporary Gallery, Te Uru. She released a collection of poems and memoir reflections in 2021, and she's currently experimenting with flash fiction and poetry.
Thank you. Kia ora all. I too am reading from Breach of All Sides, and my given title was To Enter or Not to Enter. I was lucky enough to be in Dublin on Bloomsday just before COVID broke out, with everyone dressed up and having a Guinness in the famous Kennedy's pub, which was one of James Joyce's favourites. And this reading that I'm giving is based on the famous passage that led to Ulysses being banned in the United States. And we were lucky enough to be in the pub just when it was being read. So those of you who know Ulysses well will see I've actually lifted, on instructions from Michelle, some phrases straight from James Joyce. To enter or not to enter. Came a day when he asked her to go fishing. Fishing, the last thing she'd dreamt of. The first thing he did was wedge his rod firmly in the sand. The very sight of its taut thrust against the blue cloud-swirled sky set her mind racing. She had done her years of grappling and groping in cars. Worst were Morris Minors, with the gear stick always in the wrong place. Best, for a few euphoric months, was a Princess Silver Cloud, but she had never felt anything like this. It started in the newsroom. Every time Paul came near her, the tingling began. At first, round her ankles, bristling up to her knees, her thighs, then creeping from her belly to her throat. Sometimes she knew Paul must be right behind her. The tingling told her. It was like a handheld compass needle quivering to find its north. In the daily rush to meet the noon deadline, there were moments they were close, delivering copy to the sub-editor's desk, waiting by the chief reporter's desk, collecting car keys to head out. That was when she started going hot, cold, pink, purple, just seeing Paul. It was in the afternoon calms that books became a bridge between them. Oh, how his voice ripped into her. Oh, what treasured words. Paul introduced her to Durrell, Lawrence with his quartet, to the mysterious German man, Thomas, busy with all that other kind of longing in Venice. Rilke's letters to the young poet she already knew. What a conversation flowed on his eternal current. And Thomas, Dylan, with those thunder-clapping eyes. Paul gave her a copy of his collected poems, and they laughed that she was Miss Thomas, Welsh ancestry singing in her veins. And now, here she was, on a beach, looking at that rod, her tingles rippling through her like Rilke's current, her mind making wild connections as she remembered the passage they had read together just a week ago. Oh, what joy it would be to lean far back on that rock, to let her graceful, beautifully shaped legs be revealed, to let the sun caress her soft and delicately rounded thighs, to let Paul choose to, or not to. She knew she wouldn't resist. This force was a living death to deny. Oh, for that Roman candle of golden starburst. Oh, imagine, here she was today, lying tingling on a beach with Paul. Oh, she was in raptures, all because she had said, oh, yes, to fishing. Yes, fishing. Thank you.
Thanks, Trish. Sorry, I was on mute. Ian Witty is the award-winning author of 9 novels, 16 collections of poetry, a collection of stories, 2 books of essays, a memoir, several art catalogues, and a monograph on the artist Bill Culbert.
Morena, everybody. I've done a dutiful thing. I've written a little note to myself because the text I wrote is a wee bit overcomplicated, so I thought I'd better explain a little in advance. The COVID and James Joyce breach infected story with that opening line from Ulysses and gold flushed more is told by a young guy called Antonio Ponto, or Tony for short, who has just emerged from 14 days ISO against COVID transmission after returning from a trip to Venice and its bridges, or breaches, as Joyce called them, to track down the connections to his family ancestor, also called Antonio Ponto. Now, the historical Antonio Ponto was on James Cook's vessel Endeavour in 1769, and his descendants, Tony and Tony's brother, nicknamed Pronto, are meeting up for post-lockdown drinks at a bar with a view of Auckland Harbour Bridge, or breach, and with them is a woman named Lydia, whom Tony thinks of in Joycean terms as Miss Douce, with whom he's crazily in love. And so during his 14 days in ISO lockdown, following his family trip to Venice, Tony has been reading James Joyce's Ulysses, and his thoughts and conversation about Venice are haunted by numerous Joycean references and words, not least to the famous Venetian bridge Ponte di Rialto. And so will Tony cross that breach in Auckland and connect with Miss Douce? That's the question we'll find answered or not. So, and gold flushed more. Lovesick, but no longer ISO sick, Antonio desire-ascended the hill beyond which the glittering Waitemata and its Arachne Rialto span of urgeting trafficking traffics called to him, a call pure, long and throbbing, long in dying call. And beyond the busy overreach of Harbour Bridge would be, he knew, as if embodied in his melting self, the sweetly decaying pink ruin of the Chelsea Sugar Works. And he knew, as if already seeing it, a sail, a wave upon the waves. Just stop it, he said aloud to his mind mutter, you're not in Venice now. And saw the bypassing man's head jerk towards him. And you're not James fucking Joyce either. The bypasser pretended to hurry. But now, here they three were, harbourside at table, with drinks, Brother Ponto, and at last, a veil, a wave upon the waves. That's what the poor guy heard me raving. A veil, a wave upon the waves? What were you on about, Tony? ISO got to you then? At last, Lydia, Miss Douce, across the table, her lips moist with a sip of wine. I missed you all, he lied. You should try it. 14 days in ISO with James Joyce. Beyond their table, across the promenade, over the balustrade, lazily in light breeze, the buxom sails of Waitemata. Her eyebrows raised. Really? I was in Trieste, where Joyce lived for a while when he was writing Ulysses. Then I was in Venice, where my Italian Mobar, I had the book with me. You kept in touch with the book? with your Italian mob, silly. I went there to meet them. I tracked them down in Venice via my heritage. There's a historical connection via James Cook. But now, a what the fuck Lydia frown. Was he losing Miss Douce, Lydia? An elbow nudge from quick on uptake brother Pronto Ponto. A top-up aunt, Lydia? But why stop now? An ancestor called Antonio Ponto was on Cook's endeavour here in 1769. He noticed her flush. It's true, eh, Pronto? And gold flushed more. He was from Venice. A wee bit obsessed, brother Tony. Another Pronto nudge. So serve him right. 14 days ISO with the most boring book ever written. But now the septuration flush leaning forward with a lovely smile across the table. You're so full of shit, Tony, but know what? What? The need for a deep breath, but that would be too obvious. It's really a great story. Miss Douce raised her refill. Here's to the Joycean Ponto lockdown. They three clinked. And Ulysses, Antonio Ponto, descendant, and Ponte di Rialto. Gone too far? Lydia Douce grin.
Kia ora, Ian. Our next writer is Alex Reese Abbott, who is a New Zealand Irish writer and a Penguin Random House Right Now finalist. Often shortlisted, her work has won the Irish Novel Fair, Northern Crime, Avon, and H.G. Wells prizes.
Kia ora, and a big thanks to Michelle and Tina and the festival team for an awesome program and a very happy 10th birthday. I want to dedicate this story to my late great cousin CJ, who was my mentor in all things, especially Pav. And this reading to my Auntie Jan, it's her anniversary today. She made a pretty mean chocolate slice. It's a story that first appeared in Flash Frontier in their Sweet edition in March 2021, which was edited by Kathy and Jack over at Indie Pavlova Press, and it's coming out in September in Best Small Fiction. So in 2023, it'll be in the Pavlova Press anthology as well, which is dedicated entirely to Pavlova, which is a brave and sweet undertaking. But I mean, who can resist a piece of Pav in all its creamy glory? So you can tuck in by following Pavlova Press on Facebook or on their blog, which is pavlovapress.co.nz. So without further ado, Pav Queen for a day. Check in with Tui and Alison, steadfast culinary Antipodean goddesses. Study your Edmund's Gospel. Scan the New Zealand Women's Weekly for tips. Get the inside track from your cuz. Thank Kenneth Wood as your retro duck egg blue mixer beats whites till glossy peaks hold. Thank cuz when she phones and swears that vinegar's the only thing to stabilise the foam. Wrap your baking tray in foil. Yes, cuz, gas mark 1, gentle heat. Leave her cooling in the oven. Got to get those edges crisp. Use Tupperware to prep and store. Beat that cream stiff. Go easy or she'll separate and you'll get butter. Yep. Dash of sugar and a splash of vanilla. Chill. Decorate at the last minute. You don't want a soggy mess. Got it. Don't be mean. Fuck the calories and slather her with cream. Okay, cuz. Crown her with wedges of ruby strawberries. Alternate with slices of glut cheap kiwi fruit. That chartreuse contrast makes her really Christmassy, eh? Hug cuz when she comes round to yours and warns you not to go overboard with the fruit or you'll send the cream watery. A shower of chocolate hail? Stop tutuing. All good, cuz. Put the aircon on low and cold. Settle cuz in the passenger seat with no seatbelt across her ample bosom. Balance your perfect baby on her lap. Drive across town. In the car park, near the front door, take the tray from her as she does the careful transfer to your arms, gives you the once over, clicks her tongue and tilts her chin. Breathe, smile when Cuz gives her nod of approval. You might make it. Strut into the hall, arms outstretched with your foil-lined tray, your festive centerpiece. She's pretty fucking gorgeous. Put her down. Careful. Careful now, so that she doesn't crack or seep. Savor the nods and the cup eyeing. Crunchy edges, squidgy marshmallow center. See? Nobody's picking foil from their teeth. Enjoy the compulsory dissing of bloody Aussies, nicking our national dessert. Banish that lingering epic domestic science cast disaster from years ago. This pavlova is completely demolished in under 5 minutes. Sweet. Chill. Toast your cuz. Toast this rite of passage. Thank you.
Thanks, Alex. I learned a lot about pavlova making in that story.
I've got to hold up my hand, Tina, and confess I've never made one.
Oh, you sound like an expert. So
our next
writer is Catherine Kearella de Moncos. Her recent short fiction appears or is forthcoming in Flash Frontier, Heavy Feather Review, XRAY Literary Magazine, and many other places. She lives in Greenwich Village in New York City.
Thank you. The story I'm about to read appeared in Flash Frontier and will appear in Best Small Fictions 2022. It is based on, or at least inspired by, my love of the color red with a nod to nonconformity. It's called Fiesta Chili Pepper Period. Bloomers, the poofy underwear bursting with lace trim worn by 19th century women. Mom buys a pair for me to wear under my gray-green plaid school uniform when I am 7. Oh, if Sister Augustine only knew. We try to jazz up the clinically depressed outfit with forest green velvet saddle shoes, but I am returned home with a note to return to school only when I am sporting the prescribed brown Buster Browns. Mom trims my braids with purple paisley headband and neon wool ties, all to the same effect. Come back when you're ready to look like the rest of the flock. Hence, the underwear. With red satin ribbon. That shiny red, a real tomato orange, what the designer's color Bible, Pantone, calls Fiesta. Pulsing with life and ready to party. I am tantalized by its heat. My secret red makes me giggle with confidence that out there in a gray-green world, a world sometimes like sea foam after a storm, laden with debris and rot, I am set apart. In middle school, a red patent handbag, more a melt than a Fiesta, but still strong, vibrant. In college, I paint the walls of my bedroom a red, hot, passionate fire truck, chili pepper lipstick, and I am spicy, a little bit salty. Tangerine tango highlights, and I am a sunset shimmering with energy. And now, Pantone period, the one with the outline of a bleeding uterus on the colored chip card. Sister Augustine, I think I'm ready now. That's it.
Thank you. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
Wellington-based Tim Jones has published a novel, a novella, 2 short story collections, and 5 poetry collections, and co-edited 2 poetry anthologies. He lives in Wellington and is a climate change activist, helping to work on a just transition to a low carbon future.
Kia ora koutou, and thank you, everybody. When Michelle got in touch, she reminded me that I'd had a piece published in the very first issue of Flash Frontier. It was dark comedy when I wrote it. To be honest, 10 years later, I'm not sure if it still qualifies as comedy. But here we are. It's called The Beginnings of America. The Ice Age receded. The land rebounded higher and better than before. With our crew of cutthroats and cartographers, we set off to discover America. When we came off the boat, we made straight for the nearest Walmart to check our makeup and hair. The assistants bowed and scraped, their feathers waving. The goods on the racks waited silently for us. We would need them as we moved across the countryside, establishing the Rust Belt, the Sun Belt, the Mortgage Belt. The assistants moved around us, lulling us with their chants. We established condominiums in the Turkey woodlands. Various persons departed in their Conestogas, vanishing from view as they entered shallow depressions, becoming visible, though foreshortened, as they crawled up and over mountains. We found ample resources conveniently close to a system of navigable rivers that ran generally south by east. Great herds roamed the land, the buffalo, the passenger pigeon, the investment banker. Each fell before our guns. Upon this rock, upon this butte, upon this mesa, I will build my church. So much to celebrate. We retired to our ships at night, and in the morning praised the Lord for our safe deliverance. Our assistants, unused to our ways, watched from the edge of the forest. In the morning, when we called for them, we found that they had gone before us. In years to come, we would find traces of them, discarded arrows, campfires, bones, always pointing west. Thank you.
Kia ora, Tim. Our next writer is Matt Potter. Matt lives in Adelaide and is the founder of Bequame Publishing. He is the author of a travel memoir, short story collections, ESL, teaching resources, and a novella.
Good morning. This is from the story I'm reading. It's actually not really a story. It's actually like a fake newspaper article, and it actually finishes or completes this book, which is The Shit List, which was published in January 2020. As a publisher, I am able to, well, sometimes I actually, with anthologies, if there's a theme to the anthology, sometimes I actually provide linking stories or other kinds of things that actually flesh out the whole idea. And the Shit List is basically about a librarian who sends a letter to the editor of her local newspaper, saying that she is so pissed off with people in town that she is leaving forever. And the Shit List is the list of people who have pissed her off enough to send her packing. And basically, so all the writers were asked to write a story about why their character or characters were included on the librarian's shit list. So this is actually the very last, it's an article, a fake article that appears in the local newspaper after she has left town, and presumably everyone has read all the stories about the people who have been included on her shit list. So it originally published in the Quonsetville Quacker, October 10th, 2019. New Chief Librarian appointed by local political reporter Meriwether Rosenschultz. Following the sensationally abrupt departure of Mrs. Euphoria Rivers in June and a subsequent exhaustive search to find a replacement, Town Clerk Daniel Dubonnet yesterday announced the appointment of a new municipal chief librarian. The new appointee is Mr. Theodore Waldmeister of San Francisco. I have no previous connections to Quonsetville nor to the entire state of Vermont, the new appointee said, so I come to Quonsetville as fresh as a daisy. Moving to Quonsetville will start a new chapter in Mr. Waldmeister's life. I list my hobbies as leatherwork, needlepoint, and stimulating conversation, said Mr. Waldmeister, and I'm looking forward to extending my interests in all three. Mr. Waldmeister leaves a responsible position as chief curator with the Castro collection of camp curios. But it's time to get back among the people, Mr. Waldmeister added. Despite spending the last 21 years living in San Francisco, Mr. Waldmeister has not always lived a big city life. I was raised in New Hamburg County, Iowa, but I got out of Nowheresville just as soon as I could, Mr. Waldmeister revealed. But what it taught me is this: even cow towns deserve some culture. Plus, I come from a family of 10, and we still all meet up at Thanksgiving and Christmas, so I have kept in touch with small communities that way. What can Quonset-villians expect with Mr. Waldmeister behind the library's front desk? Well, my college dissertation was on the role of the scream in silent horror movies, so I am hoping to start a Golden Years of Cinema program. And what of the touchy subject of extending library opening times to Sundays? My true intention is not just bringing people into the library, but bringing the library out to the people, Mr. Waldmeister said. All options will be considered. After all, a community that reads together stays together. You can find Mr. Waldmeister behind the desk at the Quonsetville Municipal Library from Monday, October the 14th.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you.
Catherine McNamara grew up in Sydney, ran away to Paris to write, and ended up in Ghana running a bar, as you do. Her most recent collection, Love Stories for Hectic People, won the Saboteur Award in the short story category. Catherine is flash fiction editor for Litro magazine UK.
Hi, and thank you. I'm Buonasera from Italy. I'm going to read a story from Love Stories for Hectic People. And I don't usually do humor, but I think this story has elements of humor. I mean, it makes me laugh, so I hope it makes you laugh a little bit. It's about a couple and it's about money. So I think we've all been there. Well, maybe not quite in this way. It's called Banking. Okay. A few weeks after Charlotte left her boyfriend, she selected a celebratory handbag, but discovered her credit card was missing from her purse. Kenneth had been raw, centered, and occasionally violent, in a way that had marshaled her into passionate submission. She had finally seen that he was an inconsiderate bully, badly programmed as a child. She checked online and found that £42 remained in her account, and the other $3,000 had been spent or withdrawn over the past few days. She was livid. This was hard-won holiday money she might have spent with Kenneth on Corfu, clubbing and staying at a beach hotel and drinking cocktails every night. She wouldn't have minded paying for him before, but now she was planning a trip to Norway on the fjords, alone with her new, non-existent handbag. Did he think she was stupid? She parked outside his block and pressed his buzzer. No answer. She pressed again, long and relentless, remembering how she used to stand burning right here, how once she had gathered a bag of rose petals from the park and cast these on his bed sheets, where they had made spellbinding love. Kenneth leaned out over the railing, bare-chested, his halo of wild hair cast down. That mane she used to love was now so scrappy. Hey, Charlotte. Kenneth, I need to talk. Can't talk. I'm coming up. She pulled her body up the stairwell. He let her in. She had already bolted herself up tight so that his lean abdomen and those loose drawstring pants would have no effect upon her. She felt a little undone, but thought she was doing fine. Kenneth said he would make her a cup of tea, and although there was no evidence, Charlotte knew the presence of another woman was on display. That noisy woman had been subdued by the magnified, matchless moments of intimacy when she had groaned, like Charlotte, like a cat. Did you take my credit card, Kenneth? Charlotte called out to the kitchenette. The money's all gone. What? Give it me. Don't have your credit card, Charlotte. He came and sat next to where she was hunched on the couch. Charlotte cupped her hot tea. Kenneth lolled back and his hand reached out, making warm contact with her waist. She felt the journey of his hand, the architecture of the bones, the electric impulses on their travels out from his brain, his bitten down nails, and the bustling transport of his blood. "Don't touch me," she said. She splashed the tea all over him and his grimy couch. Charlotte did not go to Norway. She did not buy the overpriced handbag, inappropriate for a fjord cruise anyway. Kenneth's cries had brought a neighbour running to the front door and rushing inside. Charlotte had never seen this woman before, much older, with loose clothing, loose breasts, but a firm, high rump that stood up challengingly. She looked past Charlotte at Kenneth clutching his stomach. Charlotte was now appalled by what she had done, and Kenneth's moans had tapered off. "Kenneth, what's happened to you?" Kenneth pulled himself up, retrieved the empty cup Charlotte had tossed at him, told this woman he had been clumsy enough to spill his tea. "Doreen, Charlotte, Charlotte, Doreen. Hi, hi." Doreen marched out with her firm bottom following close behind. When the door slammed, Charlotte sat there for a full minute. Then her hand crawled over and untied Kenneth's trousers. She got onto her knees and hiked up her dress. Their eyes careered into each other. After making love, they slept. Leaving Kenneth had truly exhausted Charlotte's body. Her desire and her reason had thrashed together these last weeks. She had lost weight, and her colleagues had become concerned. But now, in the bedroom, enveloped in Kenneth's scent and arms and skin, Charlotte unpicked her rationale. She could easily earn the money again. They would go to Corfu and stay by the beach. She kissed his forehead with its light film of grease after his exertions, marveling at the way he could drop into slumber, the way a bird cruised off a cliff. She wanted to crawl into his dreams. On the way back from the bathroom, Charlotte saw Kenneth's stuffed wallet on a shelf above the bed. It was at eye height next to another book he had never read, inviting her to rifle through and prove one of them honest, the other thoroughly unjust. She looked over the composition of their bodies, hers nude and standing, his folded in shades of beauty. She stared at the wallet. Kenneth's eyes opened. That's all.
Thanks so much, Catherine.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Our next writer is James Norcliff, who's based in Christchurch. He has published 10 collections of poetry, more than a dozen novels for young people, and is an editor of Flash Frontier, an adventure in short fiction, and is a central committee member of National Flash Fiction Day.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome, James.
Thank you very much. I'd like to read a piece called Control Tower. It comes from my most recent poetry collection about 3 or 4 years ago called Deadpan. Michelle suggested we could explain a little bit how the poem came about or the piece came about. I guess I got a little bit interested in towers when we had a stopover in Dubai, and I looked around the airport and I found there were far more towers at the airport, not so much towers, but cranes, than there were in the rebuild of Christchurch at the time, which was going ahead. But the other source, I think, of the poem is our large garden. And I'm very, very fond of the idea of garden sculpture. But Joan, my wife, is not. She prefers nature natural for some stupid reason. And to this day, we don't have any garden sculpture. So Control Tower, I guess, addresses that issue. I'll just put my glasses on. Roger desired a control tower. Joanne saw through him immediately. "And the garden," said Roger. "No," said Joanne. "It would be nice," Roger insisted, "positioned between the Ceres Forest Pansy and the Cornus Eddie's White Wonder. It would clash. It would have a certain majesty, a garden sculpture. It would out-sculpture all other garden sculptures, but slender, towering, No, said Joanne. It would make a statement, said Roger. It would have stature, height, lights. I have read Freud, said Joanne. Red for port, green for starboard, and blue for the ineffable sadness of the world, said Roger. No colours, said Joanne. And it would be useful, said Roger, for the control of air traffic. We don't have air traffic, said Joanne, but I do believe now we're really getting to the rub of it. There is air traffic, said Roger. Lights high in the sky, vapor trails like ribbons to paradise. You don't want control, ribbons or vapor, said Joanne. Let them be. It would make a statement, said Roger. No, said Joanne. No control tower. But, said Roger. No buts, said Joanne. No colours, no traffic, no lights, no tower. I think that's the end of it. Yeah. Thank you.
I would actually like Roger's control tower in my garden. I think it would tie in very nicely with the trees and the birds. Thank you. Eric Kennedy is the author of poetry collections published by Te Herenga Waka University Press, and his poems, stories, and criticism have been published in literary journals. Originally from New Jersey, he lives in Otatahi, Christchurch.
Kia ora koutou katoa. As I'm last, I get the privilege of saying it's been a pleasure to listen to everyone else read. It's been a lovely session. Yeah, my latest book, Another Beautiful Day Indoors, has a section of flash pieces in the middle of it. And this is one of those pieces. Not much to say about it other than to say that it's spoken by a fourth person who is joining the three wise men as they go west towards Bethlehem. It's called The Plot of the Nativity Play. A bright new star appeared in the sky. My friends Balthazar, Caspar, and Melchior thought it was shining over Bethlehem. Not so sure about that, I said. I think it could be over Athens or maybe Augsburg. Of course it's over Bethlehem. You think I don't know where Bethlehem is? Asked Balthazar. I said nothing. The star could betoken the coming of an infant God. Perhaps we're being touched by the breath of something holy, said Caspar. We could bring gifts, gold, frankincense, and myrrh, said Melchior. No one likes myrrh, I said. Now it was my friend's turn to be silent. We crossed the trackless wastes, buffeted by foul winds, menaced by mysterious temptations. We passed skeletons, dog, camel, human. It was an awful trip. Dirty, tedious, and uncomfortable, and I wasn't shy about saying so. BC&M mollified me with ecstatic flim-flam. We were journeying deep into the country of belief, they said. Destiny was guiding our feet into the way of peace. After a number of days, we arrived at the gates of Bethlehem and spoke to a watchman. Had anything noteworthy happened in the city recently? Well, a child has been born to Mary and Joseph, a young couple who have just moved here from Nazareth, the watchman said. Anything else? The pub up the road is doing a 2-for-1 fish and chips night tonight, he said. Okay, my friends, I said, you were right. This is a miracle. The star we had followed was blazing directly overhead, shrinking our shadows almost to nothing. Thank you.
Kia ora, Eric. And I'm so impressed that we've actually had all our readings and we have some time up our sleeve. So I would actually like to throw out a question for our participants. In what ways do you like to use humour in your work, in your writing?
I can't not do it.
You just have to do
I
it.
stopped trying to years ago. I just thought, no, I kept thinking, you know, if they did this, this would be really funny. If they did this, this would, well, you know, I kind of think if I laugh, I sometimes read things out to my partner. I often come up with anthology ideas, and I was like the shit list. I said, what about if I did an anthology called The Shit List? And I started to laugh, and then I thought, well, there's an idea, and it just went from there. So I think that, yeah, years ago, I reckon, 20, 25 more years ago, I thought, no, this serious stuff is not happening for me. I can actually say serious things by being funny. I can't not do it. It's too hard.
I think I like to use humor because it's subversive. It pulls the rug, and of course the idea of punchline is a great surprise when you can pull humor off.
Good point. Yes, Tim.
I'm not sure this really answers the question, but what I've noticed for me is I'm more likely to use humour in fiction than in poetry. I have written some humorous poetry, but the weird divide in my head between what is a story and what is a poem, the humour normally falls on the fiction side. But also I think even with fiction, even when the material's quite dark, and quite a lot of my material is dark, it's good to have that humour as a bit of a leaven to it.
Really interesting you should say that. Do any of the others find that their humour is falling into one genre rather than another?
No, not really. I mean, I find I just use a lot of humour in poems, I guess, because mostly I'm just reflecting on whatever's going on around me, and there are so many absurd and funny things happening every day. But I do think it just depends on what kind of person you are, or what kind of personality you have for humour. That's what I mean. I don't think you can go, I'm going to write a funny poem. I never think like that.
I wonder how many of you have actually written something that you didn't initially think was funny, but your readers find funny.
Everything.
Yeah.
I think also humor allows for double meaning and ambiguity in a way, and that gives your poem, your story, a lot more depth and richness. Yeah, I guess I really enjoy reading humor. You know, some of the best books are some of the funniest books. I mean, a lot of people here tonight have been talking about Ulysses, and it's really, really a very funny book.
Because there's so many absurdities in it, right? Yeah. Ian, did you want to jump in?
Yes, I did. Am I now audible?
You are audible.
Oh, good. Yeah, I was agreeing with the comment that the good thing about humour is its subversiveness. What I like the subversiveness most in respect of is pulling the rug out from under the relationship of the writer and the reader, because writers are rather apt to take themselves too seriously and to conceal themselves a little too obviously inside characters. And humour is a great way of giving the reader the cue to bust open that particular little subversion. Yeah. I think it also makes us as writers a bit more human, you know, and aware of our own frailties and absurdities. I think it's quite a nice thing to do. Catherine, did you want to comment?
Catherine or Catherine? No, I was thinking, I agree with what Diane said about absurdity. I mean, I don't intentionally write anything humorous. I don't think I tend to go a bit dark, but maybe you'll have a character who makes you laugh as a writer. I mean, you're operating this person, thinking with this person, and that can become a way of expressing the absurdity of existence, really. And that can be humorous, tragic at the same time. And I also love the use of language, which can sort of be spun around and become humorous. So yeah, it's a sort of about absurdity for me, I think, not intentional.
And I think, I suspect for the poets in this group as well, there must be a lot of lovely wordplay around absurdity and the ways you can use words.
Yes, I think play is the operative word. And that I write a lot of fiction for young people too, and that almost always stems from playing around with an idea, kicking it around, and having a lot of play with a situation. And the other word you mentioned, Tina, was absurdity, and I think that's what really gets things going sometimes, developing the absurdity of the situation to the nth degree, if you can.
I think, Tina, if I may comment, years ago, I did a book for young parents called Pajamas Don't Matter. And the whole idea of it was to take some of the heavy seriousness out of being a parent. And there can be nothing better than playing with your child and laughing with your child as a basis for the rest of the absurdities of life. And I was lucky enough to work with Dick Frizzell, so we had visual humor as well as very simple words with a lot of humor for young parents to lighten the heavy messages they kept getting hit over the head with.
And I think, James, you made the point earlier that you can say some serious things about by being funny, or maybe it was Eric.
I didn't say anything, but I was thinking, if you don't write things that are funny, there's actually a whole lot of stuff that you just like categorically exclude from what you can write about, because so much of everything that happens is stupid, like mind-bogglingly, mind-numbingly ridiculous and like beneath notice, unless you consider it to be funny. So unless you're willing to kind of use that part of your toolbox, you'll have to ignore a lot of stuff. And I don't know, that kind of, you'll never be as well-rounded as you could be if you do that.
I think, yeah, so go ahead.
I think one of the mistakes that writers make when they write sex scenes is that sex is absurd and it's humorous. And so, you know, if you actually try and make it serious, then to be honest, I think you've lost the plot. I think that it's just bizarre, and that if you think of it that way, I think that writing sex scenes can be quite fun, but I think that if you keep them funny, because it is absurd, then you're probably going to be able to do it. But I think that people have said how absurd life is, and so many things in life are absurd, and if you actually, it does help if you kind of see things that way. But I think that if you can, writing something that's funny, and I always think, hey, if I think it's funny, then probably other people are going to think it's funny too. So, you know, that helps, I think. But certainly things are really absurd, and you don't even have to sort of provide an absurd twist to things. Just present it as in its own natural state, and people will laugh because it is silly.
I mean, I think we've seen that a lot during COVID. I mean, you know, you can look at a subject like that's serious and impacting on so many of us, and yet you've got to laugh, right? There are so many ridiculous, absurd moments in serious subjects.
Yeah, like
and it gives another angle, doesn't it?
Yeah, sticking something up your nose every second day because you have to provide a test to your workplace. I mean, that's just dumb, but I do it. And at the time think, this is crazy, but you know, hey, it's funny. And if I don't do it, there's a serious side to it too.
Yeah.
I suppose one thing I was thinking, I said earlier, I don't really write much humorous poetry. I do sometimes write satire. I think compared to when I started writing, I think satire's kind of gone out of fashion over the years, especially because there's always quite a big risk that people won't perceive something is satire, but especially when it comes to political poetry that runs into sort of big P political territory, then satire is definitely something I like to use.
Tom Lehrer gave up satire when Ronald Reagan was elected. He said, there's no point anymore.
And that must be true of Trump's era as well.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah.
Well, I think if nobody else has got a comment.
I was just going to say, for me, it's I would agree with particularly with Jim and Matt, and it's often voice or character driven. I don't set out intentionally to write something, and the Pavlova piece is part of that, but it was just a very very direct, very, I suppose, ironic voice that came to me about the pressure of a small ritual, which can culturally in that context mean so much. And this, you know, this voice that even though I haven't made a pavlova, I still have all those instructions very, very present in my head, and the you know, the overblown import of the getting your pav right. So, and with Matt, a lot of his themes in his publications are very evocative and generative as well. And I think if you are prepared to go along and play with that, surprising things come out. I was told on a course once with a top BBC comedy producer who has the distinguished record of having the longest running sitcom, that he has had real trouble finding writers who would write comedy because it's frightening. You can say, oh, you know, that was quite a good poem, but it wasn't to my taste. I'm not big on control towers, but everyone thinks they know what's funny and what's not. And so it can feel like quite a judgy place to be in as a writer, quite a vulnerable place, I suppose.
Well, I'm so pleased that we've had the time to actually have a discussion after this panel, after our readings. And I want to thank, first of all our wonderful participants this morning. And I'd like to thank our viewers too, who have been watching this event. Like to remind everyone to tune into other sessions which are running all day. Plus tonight at 6 o'clock, there is the wonderful awards night. And I'd like to say a big congratulations to National Flash Fiction Day. 10 years is a pretty awesome achievement. So thank you again, and signing off.
I'd like to thank Michelle for all her hard work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Thank you, Michelle.
Yes, thank you.